Revenge with Karen. You should feel lucky we're even paying out your PTO, he muttered, sliding the envelope across the table like he was bribing me to keep quiet. Then came the line, smug as ever. Just remember, we control your job references. His grin stretched so wide I could still see the scraps of yesterday's spinach stuck in his molars. It was meant to rattle me, to make me plead or cry, maybe even beg him not to blacklist my career. Instead, I just looked at the envelope, then back at him. I forced the faintest smile, the kind you flash right before pulling someone's plug. The air stank of printer toner, fake lemon floor polish, and the fading stench of arrogance from a man who thought he was untouchable. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like flies circling a corpse. I didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't even blink. Thanks, I said coolly, folding the check into my notebook with care. Good to have clarity. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head like he'd just claimed some kind of victory. It's just business, Ava. Nothing personal. The exact phrase people use when it's entirely personal, about power, control, ego. And his ego. I'd seen it sprawled across every status update, every code review he pretended to grasp, every order that ended with "make it happen." This wasn't a layoff, not really. Let's not kid ourselves. They pushed me out because I built something beyond their comprehension. And that scared them. When you're the one keeping the foundation from collapsing, you don't get applause. You get resistance. You get silence. And eventually, you get a streamlining memo with your name written in invisible ink. As I stood, he gave a fake laugh. No hard feelings. I stopped at the door, turned, looked him dead in the eye. My voice steady, my eyes dry. Not a single one. Then I walked out. Back at my desk, everything was too quiet. Like a war scene right after the explosion, when the sound cuts out. Most people didn't lift their heads. Some pretended to read emails that weren't even open. A handful glanced at me, then dropped their eyes in shame. All except Ethan, the intern. He gave me the smallest nod. That was enough. The kid had promise, if they didn't crush him the way they tried to crush me. I packed quickly. Always traveled light. 1 drawer's worth. A coffee mug, my notebook with system sketches, and the pen I snagged at the last offsite, the only one that worked on those awful whiteboards. I left the team MVP plaque they gave me last year. Let it rot here. Before shutting down my laptop for the last time, I sent out 2 emails. The first went to legal, polite as ever, requesting a written account of my IP contributions from the past 18 months. For the records, of course. Documentation. Clarification. Alignment. The right words, but the email itself? A weapon dressed in silk. The second I sent from my personal laptop, on a separate network. A memo to myself. Not code, just a cleaned-up infrastructure map. The connections, the balancing acts, the logic web I designed so the whole system didn't collapse under its own weight. Something only I knew, because I never told them. And they never thought to ask. They just assumed I'd always be there. I pressed send. Then I wiped every trace from my desktop, reformatted the drive, and dropped my badge in the tray like an empty shell casing. By the time the elevator door slid shut, my name had already been stripped from Slack. The notification blink on my phone vanished a second later. Quick work. It always is. They believe deleting your profile erases your mark. Let them believe it. Let them spin whatever version of the story keeps them comfortable. I wasn't mad. Not in the messy, explosive, lawsuit-hungry way they wanted. No. What I felt was quieter, sharper. I was calm, because I held knowledge they didn't. You can cut loose the architect, but if you don't know how to read the blueprint, you're just standing in a structure with no load-bearing walls. And one day, that structure will groan, splinter, and collapse. But sure, at least the org chart will look neat. The thud of my mug hitting the cardboard box echoed far louder than it should have in a room packed with people pretending I wasn't there. Maybe it was just me, but every stapler snap and keyboard clack seemed pointed, like they were trying to drown out the space I left behind. Not a single good luck. No quick hug. Not even the fake let's keep in touch from the guy who used to swipe my post-its and claim my Jira tickets. Just 30 heads buried in screens, as if their monitors had suddenly become fascinating works of art. Even Claire, Miss, we should grab drinks sometime. Turned her head and fiddled with the non-existent volume on her headphones as I walked by. I didn't expect a send-off. I'm not delusional. Still, the complete erasure bit deeper than I wanted to admit. The way they scrub you out before your chair even cools, like you're contagious. Like the scent of disposability might cling. Except Ethan, the intern, barely out of school, still speaking like people mattered. He stood stiff near the kitchen, gripping a granola bar like it was a flotation device. He gave me a slow, steady nod. No words, just respect. I nodded back. No smile. Didn't need to. It was the only genuine human gesture in the whole damn building. My box sat half empty. A picture frame I never got around to hanging. The mug that read "Cash me outside." A notepad filled with scribbled system diagrams no one else cared enough to decode. I left the company hoodie behind. They could keep it. I wouldn't wear that rag to take out the garbage. I moved deliberately, not with sorrow but precision. Like a surgeon cleaning instruments after a flawless incision. I unplugged my charger, coiled it neatly, and dropped it into the box like the final stitch. Then I opened my laptop one last time. Slack. Already logged out. Cute. Somebody upstairs was fast on the trigger. GitHub access revoked. Repos scrubbed clean. My name vanished from commit history like I'd never existed. But there are things they can't erase. I pulled up my personal email. Drafted a message to myself. Subject line. G3 protocol non-prod mapping. Inside was nothing flashy. Just stripped down logic flows, process charts, and notes on the undocumented fixes I'd made when the system was crumbling under load and nobody else could stabilize it. I'd never explained how I got it working again. They just assumed it stopped failing by luck, and were happy to pretend I had nothing to do with it. I hit send. Then I opened a fresh draft, this one addressed to legal. The tone. Courteous, clear, professional. For documentation purposes, I requested written confirmation of my authorship and ownership over specific proprietary modules. Then I listed them. Critical subsystems everyone depended on. The ones I quietly built on weekends when deadlines were impossible and expectations were sky-high. The ones they never credited me for. That email? A minefield wrapped in HR-friendly language. The moment I hit send, something shifted inside my chest. It wasn't relief, and it wasn't triumph. Just a heaviness. Like I dropped a sharp, heavy object on the floor behind me, knowing sooner or later, someone else would bleed from it. I shut the laptop, stood, and gave the screen one last glance before yanking the cord. Walking toward the elevator felt like wading through water. The building looked the same. Cheap carpet, wilted office plants, white boards smudged with half-forgotten ideas. But the air carried a hush, like the walls understood a mistake had been made, but had no way to apologize. I never looked back. Not when the doors slid open. Not when they shut. Not even when the familiar ping of Slack echoed behind me. Probably someone reacting with a thumbs up to my farewell. Like that could smooth it over. They can erase my face from the directory, scrub my name from commit histories, hand my parking spot to some louder guy with weaker database skills. None of that matters. Because systems remember. Not the repos. Not the neglected Confluence pages. I mean the real systems. The ones we stitched together to survive the chaos. The ones we duct tape at 2 a.m. The ones held together by caffeine, instinct, and undocumented hacks. And when those systems falter, they'll finally see I wasn't just a name they deleted. I was the last thread keeping everything from snapping apart. The day after I walked out of NYLYNC, I ignored email. I didn't post a polished farewell, or write some fake Zen thank you note to the amazing team. Ghosts don't post status updates. Instead, I woke up and stretched without Slack dragging me into another fire drill. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, just breathing, just remembering the sound of silence. No sprint planning, no pretend agile rituals, no pointless meetings masquerading as progress, but really just PowerPoint battles between directors who couldn't code their way through wet cardboard. I opened a blank doc. No logos. No branding. Just a cursor blinking in clean white space. And I wrote the most honest resume of my life. No buzzword filler, no collaborated cross-functionally with stakeholders to deliver scalable solutions. Just facts. Designed, built, and stabilized the load balancing logic handling 92% of traffic after the CDN collapse. Wrote backend routing protocols that cut API latency by 37%. Without permission, without praise. Saved a Q4 product launch by reverse engineering a feature nobody else could touch. Rebuilt it in 2 days while my director gave a speech about ownership. I didn't embellish. For once, I told the truth. When it was finished, I set up a new email alias. Ava R disappeared online. ARY took her place, a quiet tribute to my grandmother. She'd have smiled at the stealth. Under that name, I started a small consulting gig. Nothing fancy. No website. Just word of mouth from 2 ex-colleagues who escaped the grind before it shredded them too. They sent me projects, infra audits, API cleanups. One startup's backend was a mess of duct tape, and I rebuilt it in 3 days. No drama. No Slack noise. Just problems solved. It wasn't about cash. It was about air. About proving to myself I wasn't broken. That I was good at what I did. That the failure was theirs, not mine. They just hadn't realized it yet. But while YNC was starting to feel the cracks, you could see it in the patterns. Public GitHub commits slowed. Weekly releases slipped to bi-weekly, then monthly. Reddit threads appeared. Users complaining about timeouts, sync issues, weird lag. One thread read, "Why is this feature so slow now?" Dozens of frustrated replies piled on. I didn't click. I didn't need to. I knew exactly why. It was the patchwork protocol I'd built back when the system was choking under load. The one nobody else touched. The one hidden beneath 7 chain services. And a DNS redirect no one ever documented. I'd mentioned it once at lunch. The director nodded between bites of his sandwich and muttered, "Cool. Just make sure it's scalable." It wasn't scalable. It was surgical. A pressure point. A bypass, redirecting traffic like a cracked pipe rerouted through a hidden valve. And it functioned perfectly, silent, seamless, but only if you understood what had caused the pipe to split in the first place. No one seemed to. They kept logging tickets for latency spikes, pushing out quick patches, dragging DevOps into parse logs that grew more incoherent by the day. I watched it unfold like someone noticing a faint gas leak from half a block away. Still, no one spoke my name. Not publicly, not online, not even in whispers that might accidentally reach my ears. They couldn't. To say my name would be to admit I mattered. So instead they pointed fingers at the tools, at outdated code, at version mismatches. Anything but the truth. That the woman they discarded without pause was the only one who really understood how to keep the whole machine from burning down. That's the thing about systems. They remember the hands that shaped them, even when people try to forget. I didn't gloat. Didn't drop a cryptic subtweet. Didn't reply to a single email. I just observed, patient. Because when a framework starts shifting and nobody knows which support beam holds it together, they don't fix it, they panic. And panic makes noise. The message finally came at 2:13 a.m. One of those midnight pings stamped with urgency, the kind that means something is already burning or about to. They're pitching for acquisition. Buyers massive. No greeting, no signature, just a flat period like a coffin nail. It was from Tamir, one of the last sharp devs left at NileSync. Quiet guy, brilliant with memory tuning, always in shark print socks. He'd never once messaged me after I left. He hated drama. For him to reach out now meant something in the foundation was shifting. I stared at the screen for a while, didn't answer. Just sat in the dark with the cold glow of the phone casting shadows on the ceiling. I could almost feel the anxiety baked into his words. He wasn't reaching out from guilt. He was reaching out because he knew something essential was missing. And everyone else was pretending it wasn't. 2 minutes later, another text buzzed in. Different number, different edge. Same stench of unraveling. Mason 2:15 a.m. Did you leave or were you pushed? That one made me sit upright. Mason, lead engineer at Vaspera Systems. He used to run back-end boot camps in San Francisco before climbing into executive engineering. I'd met him at one of his events 5 years back, stepping in last minute when a speaker dropped. Half the slides were busted. I walked the room through a live API collapse debug with zero prep. Afterward, Mason pulled me aside. "If you ever leave your company, call me. You speak infrastructure like it's a native tongue. We never worked together, but I kept tabs on him. Mason was the type who never asked a question he didn't already know the answer to. I stared at his message. Did you leave, or were you pushed? At 2:16 a.m., I typed back. Does it matter? No reply. None needed. If Mason was reaching out now, before the acquisition news was public, before due diligence, it meant he'd spotted something in the repos, the diagrams, the churn reports. Something that screamed missing piece. Something pointing to a black hole labeled Ask Ava with a neon sign nobody wanted to acknowledge. I didn't text again. Just lay back down, eyes wide open, heart ticking fast like a warped metronome. By morning, the back channels lit up like Christmas lights. 3 emails sat unread from old coworkers. Hey, random question. Do you remember how the redirect logic was first configured? Quick check. Did the compliance module have a fallback protocol? I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I knew exactly why they were asking. They weren't ready to admit it outright. They wanted deniability, my knowledge without my name. I brewed coffee, opened Twitter, saw a vague post from Nile Sink's VP of Product about exciting transitions and the future of intelligent delivery infrastructure. It reeked of pitch deck desperation. Clicked over to Vaspera Systems LinkedIn. Their hiring board was frozen. No posts, no new listings. Their M&A team had gone silent a week back. Like a car stalled on a hill, clutch pressed, waiting. I wasn't a threat. Not yet. I wasn't even in the room. But the board was shifting, and I was watching. Bleakly funny, really. The same people who erased me were now stumbling, desperate to piece together what they couldn't see. They'd walked a buyer into a house wired with invisible circuits and said, "It just works." Except now the buyer. They had questions, and I was the unspoken answer. Real power doesn't announce itself. It builds slowly, like water pressing against a dam. And they'd just heard the first faint crack. The press release landed on a Tuesday morning. Glossy, bloated, packed with corporate fluff. NYLYNC is excited to explore strategic partnership opportunities with a premier enterprise cloud provider. Translation: we're being bought. And we want to look like we're steering the ship. And whatever you do, don't bring up churn. I didn't even blink reading it. I was knee-deep in my third client call that day, walking a team in Austin through why their microservice stack kept eating itself under load. Still, I saved the link, dropped it next to the Vespaspera job board and a dormant GitHub issue I knew would blow up soon enough. Inside Nyla's, I pictured the scramble already in motion. War rooms forming. Decks getting polished. Product managers rehearsing how to say scalability with a straight face. My old director, Doug, the same guy who once told me my docs were too thorough to be useful, was probably pacing in front of a whiteboard, trying to sell a system he never built with buzzwords he barely understood. He'd be in charge of the due diligence packet, which meant cherry-picked metrics. Uptime graphs cropped to peak hours. Retention charts with a y-axis scaled just so. I could already see the slide deck in my mind. First slide, vision. Second, numbers. Third, architecture. Big shiny block diagram, bright rectangles, arrows labeled SQS and Lambda. Though I'd never touched either. And my name? Gone. Vanished. Not in credits, not in the org chart, not in the engineering win section. But metadata doesn't forget. Deep in the systems Vesperus was digging through were traces that still carried me. API schemas tagged with my authorship, deployment scripts with my initials tucked into old shell comments. Audit logs from late-night code reviews I ran alone when everything was on fire. And then there was that comment. I hadn't thought about it in months. Just a placeholder, really. Hidden inside the eventual logic, 6 dependencies deep, behind an undocumented feature toggle. It read, hashtag if you're seeing this, it's either me, or the poor bastard who gets blamed next. A joke. A grim one. I wrote it during a delirious 2 a.m. deploy, patching a time-based caching bug nobody else could reproduce. That fix held the reporting pipeline together for a year. Nobody ever asked how. They were just glad the dashboard stopped freezing. Until now. Because someone did see it. A junior engineer, apparently. Word reached me sideways, tech gossip moving in whispers. A tweet, liked by someone I once mentored. Found the wildest code comment today, face with tears of joy, with a cropped screenshot that hid the repo's name. But I knew it instantly. The spacing, the indentation, the dry tone, mine. Which meant the buyers were digging. Which meant someone couldn't explain that part of the platform. Which meant the facade was breaking. I didn't have to leak a thing. The truth carried its own weight. Pull the keystone from an arch, and at first it still looks solid. Until the slightest push brings it down. One question in the right place. Who wrote this? Why is there no test coverage? Why does it work when no one understands why? The danger of pretending someone never mattered is eventually having to explain why everything falls apart once they're gone. I closed the tweet and sipped my coffee. New email. Consulting inquiry from a mid-sized platform in Atlanta wanting help with legacy protocols. I filed it for later. Right now, I had front row seats to the collapse. And I wasn't even inside the building. Mason was never one for drama. That's why what happened next hit even harder. Day 3 of the pre-acquisition tech review. He was buried in export compliance docs. Standard routine, boring as hell. Contributor lists, citizenship checks, access controls. The kind of paperwork you check off without thinking. But halfway down the second tab, past a wall of greenlit names and groups, he found mine. Reynolds. Status. Involuntary departure. Access, revoked. Clearance, system-wide. He blinked. Read it twice. Then looked across the table at the NYLYNC team. 3 execs deep in synergy speak, nodding along to a slide about frictionless integration. Mason closed his laptop. Not harsh, not loud. Just enough to shift the air. Let's pause here, he said evenly. The projector froze mid-transition. A flashy diagram of NYLYNC's data pipeline hung like a guillotine. The VP of product gave a strained chuckle. Sure, something unclear? Mason ignored him. He turned to the CTO. This section, routing layer, session handling, load balancing, fallback. You've labeled it stable legacy in the docs. The CTO nodded. That's right. Been untouched for over a year. Rock solid. Mason raised an eyebrow. No changes? In a high-load system like this? Correct, the CTO replied too quickly. Mason tapped the lid of his laptop, almost absent-minded, then asked, who designed it? The silence that followed was deafening. The kind that makes people shift in their seats. The kind that kills deals. The VP of engineering cleared her throat, forced a smile. It was a collaborative effort. Mason's eyes stayed on her. And under that look she broke. I meant it. It all began under Ob Reynolds, though she'd already left the company. The CEO of Vasperus, who until now had sat motionless like a predator biding its time, finally leaned forward. Not much, just enough. She was gone, the CTO faltered. A restructuring had taken place. She hadn't fit with the new strategy. Was she brought in during that transition? The CEO pressed. No. She's been out for a while. Which meant no one in the current team could confidently explain the architecture she'd left behind. Another silence followed, the kind that doesn't just hang in the air, it ends careers. The VP of product broke in frantic. We have documentation. Mason cut across sharply. We've read it. It's muddled, circular, and contradicts real behavior under synthetic load. Some modules rely on deprecated services with no fallback in place. Routing choices don't follow any existing policy. And there's a comment in the scheduler that literally says, if you're reading this, you're either me or the next scapegoat. The CTO turned pale. The CEO of Vasperus rose, unhurried, smooth, like a judge rising at the close of sentencing. We'll reschedule. Take time to revisit your internal architecture. The valuation. The CFO started. Depends on sustainability. The CEO cut him off. And right now you're asking us to buy a car with no steering column, because the mechanic got fired and nobody remembers how it turns. No raised voice. No slammed fist. Just cold, controlled authority. Then he walked out. Mason lingered. Long enough to watch the color drain from every face. He didn't grin. Didn't gloat. Only said, you should have kept her. And then he left too. Back in her apartment, Ava's phone buzzed. One text from an unknown number. You felt it coming, didn't you? She didn't answer. Instead, she poured a drink, sat by the window, and watched the city churn like a machine no one fully comprehended. They'd finally leaned on it. Moments later, her inbox pulsed. Subject line: confidential technical advisory immediate. No greeting. No filler. Just stripped urgency. Ava sipped her coffee, lukewarm and black, without caring. She stared at the unopened email. Outside, downtown moved on autopilot. A lawyer jaywalked in $1,000 shoes. A street preacher shouted at a stoplight. A scooter rider nearly became a hood ornament. She stayed still. This wasn't surprise, it was inevitability. Gravity always wins. She tapped the screen. The sender was shielded behind a Vespers proxy, but the tone screamed Mason, precise, yet cloaked in ambiguity. Requesting her availability for a closed-door consult about unresolved architecture inherited from pre-merger systems. Translation: they were panicking. She was the last light left in the tunnel. She didn't reply. Not yet. At Nylink, the implosion had begun. The acquisition was put on indefinite hold. A polished Slack announcement went out, sparking chaos. Engineering leads were dragged into endless alignment, huddles where nothing aligned. Product managers who'd spent 6 months pretending to grasp the backend now frantically messaged developers. Hey, quick. What exactly did Ava build? The VP of engineering broke first. A mass email went to the technical team. Subject: urgent, routing protocol ownership. If anyone has docs, knowledge, or contacts who understand the legacy routing protocols, please respond ASAP. We're blocked at multiple layers. Need clarity before end of day. Escalate immediately. It was 11:32 a.m. By 11:34, a junior engineer replied, I think Ava touched that system. By 11:35, Mason responded, all lowercase, no greeting. Only Ava can speak to it. The director who'd fired her, the one with the smirk and the veiled threats, suddenly vanished on leave. Some whispered stress. Others said, internal reassignment, which in corporate language meant he was being pulled into rooms where lawyers take notes. HR circulated a form seeking knowledge transfer candidates. Ava's name resurfaced. Quietly at first, then louder. But then someone remembered. She wasn't on LinkedIn. No email. No website. No trail at all. Just silence. Until that meeting request hit her inbox. Ava drained her coffee, still motionless, letting the weight of the moment breathe. Across the cafe, a couple argued over a parking ticket. A dog barked at its reflection. She didn't hear any of it. She was back in the server room at 3 a.m., configuring failover by flashlight during a blackout. Back at the whiteboard, diagramming an edge case no one wanted to face, while the CTO said, let's table that. Back in her apartment, weeks after being fired, watching the GitHub graphs flatline. And now here they were, back at her door. Not because she made noise. Because she made something that worked. She hit reply. Typed 2 words, let's talk. Closed her laptop. Smiled. The kind of smile you wear when you realize the foundation they thought was theirs had been yours all along. The room was hushed, not tense, just deliberate. Frosted glass, soundproof walls. A carafe of untouched cucumber water sweating onto a table worth more than her last 3 bonuses combined. Ava sat at one end, laptop open, cursor blinking in a terminal. At the other sat Mason, composed as ever, flanked by Vespers CEO and their general counsel. The counsel sat in silence, watching her the way surgeons watch for a pulse. No notes. No slides. She hadn't brought anything but herself. She didn't need to. What she carried couldn't be reduced to bullet lists or diagrams. It lived entirely in her mind. Vast system blueprints, failover chains, latency paths, contingency pivots, an invisible web of logic that kept machines breathing when everything else collapsed. She tapped a few keys, loading a barebones simulation, and began. Her tone was calm, even without performance. The fallback routing doesn't kick through the main queue. It slips through a sidecar daemon tied to the old Redis cluster. That cluster was never rebuilt when we left on-prem caches. No one even remembered it existed, except me. Mason nodded slightly. She went on. The trick works by simulating a dead node, letting the health checks redirect traffic. But the real key is faking the monitor service without touching the core heartbeat. It's messy. It's brittle. But it kept your acquisition target alive through 3 separate blackouts. She ran a few more commands, pulling live logs onto the screen, showing the ghost heartbeat. The cheat that let Nusink limp along for half a year under the illusion of stability. No one spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. When she finished, she leaned back, arms loose. Not defensive, not triumphant, just finished. The Vasperous CEO closed his notebook, leaned forward. You're underpaid. Ava didn't flinch. She didn't downplay it or fill the air. She let the words ring, heavy as a cathedral bell. He continued. We'd like to bring you on. VP of Platform Engineering. Blank slate. Build your vision your way. Full equity match. 7-figure package. Total autonomy. Your team. Your stack. Your rules. He slid a single sheet across the table. Not a contract, but a term sheet, pre-signed, numbers already inked in. Mason stayed silent, only watching her with steady eyes. No smugness, no I told you so, just quiet certainty, as if he'd always known this moment would arrive. Ava glanced at the page. The money wasn't what held her. What caught her attention was the last clause. No non-compete, no silencing NDAs, no ownership over what she'd built before. Freedom. She didn't smile, not fully, but inside something eased, like a strap unbuckling after years too tight. She lifted the pen, paused. One condition. The CEO arched a brow. She said, no press release. No savior headline. No new leadership to stabilize asset story. I'm not here to be anyone's PR shield. He nodded. Done. She signed. 20 minutes later, outside the building, the air felt heavier but alive. Like the sky before a storm, not the suffocation of stale office air. She didn't check her phone. Didn't tell anyone. She walked 3 blocks to the bakery that still folded butter secrets into flaky croissants, sat outside, took a bite, and breathed. Not because she had to, but because she finally could. The conference room was glass-walled, humming with expensive nerves. Soft jazz floated overhead, just loud enough to fake calm. Nilesink's execs stood by their 20-slide deck like pastors at a pulpit. At the center, Doug, the same director who once sneered at Ava. We control your references. Now he was sweating through designer fabric, fumbling cards like a school kid bluffing through Shakespeare. Every third sentence came with a cough. Across from him, Mason sat with arms folded, unreadable. To Doug's credit, the opening sounded polished. Buzzwords about innovation, scalability, cloud-native resilience, post-scale optimization. Glossy emptiness wrapped in cost. Heads nodded. That's how it goes. Until slide 17. Departures and transitions. Names appeared on screen. Titles. Sanitized blurbs. Reynolds, Senior Systems Architect. Transition responsibilities. Documentation complete. A fiction in 3 lines. Mason leaned forward. A man realizing the ground beneath was sand. He didn't interrupt. Just turned to the CEO beside him and murmured 5 words. The CEO's face drained. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't argue. He simply lowered his gaze, shut his laptop softly. Yet the sound hit harder than anything Doug had said. Doug stammered. There's context if you'd like. The CEO rose. We're done. No shouting. No fury. Just a final sentence like the drop of a blade. The Vasperous delegation gathered their things. Mason, last at the door, turned back to Doug. You should have known the difference between cutting a name and pulling a pillar. Then he left. Across the city, sunlight spilled into Ava's new corner office, the carpet still fresh, whiteboards untouched. She wasn't working. She was reading, a collection of essays on architecture, real buildings. Mason had sent it weeks earlier with a note. Some collapse from ego. Others because no one checked the foundation. Her phone buzzed. A message. To mere 12:42 p.m. He looked like someone just had the floor ripped out from under him. She set the phone down. No reply. Just silence, thick with inevitability. She didn't post it. Didn't forward it. Didn't brag. She simply smiled, small, private. Not cruel. Because she didn't need to destroy him. All she had to do was walk away and let gravity show the world what happens when the one holding everything up finally lets go. Big thanks to the legends from the old office days. Subscribe if you want to keep the chaos alive. Somewhere out there, your ex-boss is shaking in his loafers.